Welcome, everyone. Welcome to a new edition of Remixing Politics and Culture with me, your host, Pam. I am a public relations and marketing professional with a passion for social justice, voter advocacy, and culture. And tonight, on this first Sunday of Black History Month, we're going to attempt to answer some questions about what Black history is and how you define it, how we define it, and more. So we have some very interesting guests here tonight, and I can't wait for you to meet them. And all that is good. Okay. All right. I'm anxious for more of you to come into the building. Come into the building. I'm waiting for one more guest. She hasn't signed on yet, but that's okay. We're going to move forward a little bit. If you are on YouTube, please hit that like button. If you're on Facebook, hit that like button. If you're on LinkedIn, hit that like button. Please consider sharing the video. And also, if you're on YouTube, please consider subscribing. Thank you. It's a free way to support my channel. All right. So first up, we have Latrice Davis. Latrice is no stranger to the show. She's been on several times.
Hello again.
Hey, Latrice is a senior court clerk at Queens County Civil Court. She also has a background in journalism, having worked at the Associated Press. Latrice was also appointed by the to the Queens Community Board 6, serving on the Aging and Social Services and Disabilities board committee. And welcome back, Latrice. It's always good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Okay. Next, I'm going to call up Dr. Judy Foster Davis. Dr. Judy Foster Davis is a professor of integrated marketing communications at Eastern Michigan University. She is an author and is considered a leading expert of multicultural marketing and advertising, having been featured in the New York Times, the American Black Journal, the Hartman Center at Duke University, and the National Museum of American History at the Smithsonian. Welcome, Judy.
Hello.
Welcome to the show.
I'm so happy to be here.
I am so glad to have you here. And we're still waiting on one other guest, Loretta Thomas Walker. And I've talked to her earlier today. And so I'm surprised she's not here. Okay. Marcia Brown Williams was supposed to be here, but Marcia had an injury falling on the ice in Chicago and on pain meds. And so, Marcia, if you're listening to us or anything, please feel free, if you're not too groggy, to make a comment or two in the chat. If there is anyone in the listening audience who is an educator and is someone who is knows about curriculum development, I'd welcome you to chime into the show, because that was Marcia's expertise. All right, ladies. Well, I hope everything's okay with Loretta, because that's not like her, because she invited people and everything. So I'm just a little concerned. All right. So everyone, I did put the link in the chat, so that if you are on YouTube and you're not a member of YouTube, you can readily respond and reply and ask questions and comment as well. All right, ladies. So let's start with the basics. What is your definition of Black history? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
Black history in a nutshell is simple. It's us telling our stories in our voice, in our mannerisms, in our culture. That's what Black history is. And Black history is ongoing, it's evolving. And just today, history was made. Viola Davis became the third Black woman to become an EGOT. after Whoopi Goldberg and Jennifer Hudson. So congratulations to her on that. I'm not related to her, by the way. Davis is a very common surname. I wish I had that kind of connection, but I do not. But I'm happy for Viola just the same.
Right, right. What
That's
about
wonderful.
you, Dr. Judy Davis? What do you think? What is Black history to you?
Well, when I think about Black history, I think that Black history is American history and it's also global history.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that Black history is necessary and essential for our survival and advancement as a people.
Mm-hmm.
I also, we cannot rely solely on schools
Mm-hmm.
to provide this provide this teaching,
Mm-hmm.
and that parents and others have to provide what I call the supplemental education, and to take our children to museums and programs and bookstores, so forth and so on, so
Mm-hmm.
that they can be exposed to what the schools tend to leave out. And I know that we're probably going to come to the topic of that AP African American History course.
Mm-hmm.
So I will save some of my other commentary for that
Okay.
aspect of the show.
Okay. Well, I see Loretta, so I'm going to introduce Loretta Thomas Walker. Hey, Loretta.
Hello, how's it going, ladies?
It's
Hello.
going. Let me introduce you. We're so glad you could make it. Loretta Thomas Walker is a retired logistics program manager. She puts retired in all caps, who has served over 36 years for the Department of Defense in Warren, Michigan. And her position involved worldwide travel, assuring federal regulations and procedures were met. She recently moved from the Detroit area to the Charlotte, North Carolina area. So she got tired of the cold weather. Well, North Carolina has been, we've had some really cold days, but it's still not as bad as the snow and driving in the snow and the slush and all that of Michigan. So welcome, Loretta, to the show. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You.
Yeah. So I asked the ladies the question, what is your definition of Black history?
Mine is quite lengthy, ladies. I'll try to keep it very brief and everything.
Okay.
So let me just say first that God is the reason why we and I've made it this far.
Mm-hmm.
You know, many people have said that Black history is American history.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll let that stuff go. I'll let that go. But what I want to say is one of the significant acts of the Black community is that we keep information flowing to energize not only our youth, but other people, you too, trying to help them strive to do good.
Mm-hmm.
I believe one of our continual jobs as aware Black women and Black men is reminding all people that Black history is our mindset and our actions 24/7, 365 days a year. Recognizing that we are here, sisters, to help direct and even push some of our brothers and sisters to stay focused on the goal, reminding them to keep positive in their thoughts and their actions for the global community, focusing to try to strive to reach the same level of equality. So when I talk about Black history, I want to remind you all of what Trevor Noah said in his exit interview in December 22, when Trevor Noah said, if you want to truly learn about America, ask a Black woman or Black people. He said, because they know we don't have time to mess around, because anything that happens in this country or even in the global community, it comes double in our community. Comes double in our community. And if I could take an excerpt from W.E.B. Du Bois' book, the book that says The Souls of the Black Folks, where he mentioned, where he described in two terms, you all. He described in two terms. He said that double consciousness and the veil that we're living in, the struggle that we have every day, struggle to live in this country to get our respect and dignity from our fellow countrymen as an African American. I would love to sing a song to y'all, but I'm not going to sing a song, but I'm going to just remind you all what our brother, Reverend Al Sharpton said. at Tyree Nichols' funeral last week. He said, "We're not asking for special attention. We're not asking for special treatment. We just want equal dignity and treatment." And sisters, I want to go further, but I want to sing our Black national anthem. Let's lift every voice and sing. I'll just take 4 lines from there, y'all. Come on, y'all go with me here. Say, y'all go with me. Sing a song full of the faith that dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun unto our new day begun. Let us
march on till victory is won.
Is won. That's my summation of Black history. I can go further, ladies, but I want to be respectful here. Thank you.
Okay. So the next big question is because we got it because we going to Florida. We going to Florida.
We need to.
So, Judy.
Yes, ma'am.
Who controls what our kids are to be taught?
Well, it's different from state to state. And I said I was going to bring up the AP history.
We're going to get into that next because what you just said kind of conflicts with. We're in a very crazy territory.
The curriculum K through 12 is controlled typically by the state boards of education. However, if you're in higher ed like I am, the curriculum is controlled by the faculty. However, we are held to account to certain accreditation standards by the various accrediting bodies. So that comes into play as well. However, typically they do not, at least in my experience, and I'm in a business school accredited by the ACSB, they don't come and tell you exactly what it is that you have to teach or not teach, but there are certain standards there where if you're covering a topic like, say I teach consumer behavior, for example, or I teach advertising, there are certain things that go along with that. But how it's taught is up to the professor. K through 12 is a totally different ball game.
Yeah. And so Latrice, who controls it? Because this really became an issue for us on this show as I was getting school board members interviewing them to talk about, how the Republicans, the right wing, were really trying to infiltrate the school boards to ban books and to do a number of things. So who controls what our kids are taught, Latrice?
Well, I would ideally say the parents. Education is not my field of expertise, so I defer to the professor on what she said in terms of accreditations and whatnot. But it starts at home. And in terms of what's going on in Florida and what the governor's doing, basically it's censorship. It may not be the U.S. government, but it's the state government dictating what can and cannot be taught. And I feel like in many ways the governor's trolling the Black community because he has to know that by banning certain books or banning certain authors, kids aren't stupid. We were all young ones. We're going to go, why doesn't he want us to read this? Why doesn't he want us to see this? And then we're going to go seek it out on our own, whether it's at the library or, again, if the parents are engaged, they'll tell them. And just like the ongoing controversy about the 1619 Project, I bought the book and I've yet to read it. But I just feel like, okay, saying that, slavery is at, the root of America's founding isn't hypocritical. It's true. America wouldn't be what America is if it wasn't for slavery. I mean, even like with the Civil War, they often like to use euphemisms and code words. Like, okay, it was about states' rights. Okay, the states' right to do what? Maintain slavery.
Right.
And my thing is just be honest about it. George Floyd, what happened to George Floyd, spurred a reckoning of sorts. And that can only be a good thing. But I've always known that the first step towards solving a problem is admitting that you have one.
Exactly.
And America, or at least, middle-aged, older white guys who are in power in America are in denial about their role in racism and their complicity in maintaining it. Because if they were honest with themselves, they would know that this isn't anything new. Whether it's Nicole Hannah Jones, the Ta-Nehisi Coates, I mean, this isn't new. Like I read the articles and magazine pieces, and I just think to myself, duh. Now, there were a lot of things I didn't learn in school when I was growing up. Like a lot of people, I was taught, the Indians welcomed the Pilgrims and they all held hands, kumbaya. And as I got older, I realized that's not what happened.
Right.
Like here in New York, I am a member of I'm a Schomburg Society member, and I became one about at least 10, 15 years. It's been a while. But yeah, a lot of stuff I've learned at the Schomburg and have been exposed to at the Schomburg Center, I didn't necessarily learn in school. I had to learn on my own. And that was the great thing about having a library card. Something that's simple. It's a gateway to so many different worlds. And growing up in Brooklyn, like I didn't get my passport until after I had graduated from college. But having that library card allowed me to travel intellectually in so many ways. And being born and raised in New York, I was exposed to diversity at an early age. So I knew that, a lot of people aren't going to look like me or sound like me or what have you. And they don't have to. Like, I just want to be. Just let me be. That's it. I don't want preferential treatment. Just let me be. Just allow me to exist in peace. That's it.
Yes.
And Sharpton's right. We're not asking for much, but yet here we are.
Yeah, here we are. I'm going to read this comment. Samaj Brown says, Black history is happening now. What we do today is history tomorrow. What we are living now is due to the history of yesterday. Everything is connected. Everything is a continuum. The past is now, and it is the future as well. Absolutely. And you could tell she's a poet laureate. So
appreciate the words of wisdom.
Can I piggyback on what Latrice was saying?
Yes.
And the things that she learned at the Schomburg. I've done research at the Schomburg as a scholar, but what she's saying just echoes exactly what I was saying at the top of the program. And that is that we cannot count on the schools, no matter what the state is, to provide the knowledge and the education that our children need. So going to the Schomburg, having that library card, going to these programs, I know my children, and I think I've gotten on their nerves with this, is that, any place we go, if there's a cultural center, a history museum, any of that, I'm taking them in there. I've been to the Smithsonian African American History Museum probably, at least 6 times at this point. And they will appreciate it at some point down the line. I think my daughter does. My son is still,
Well, how old is your son, if you don't mind my asking?
Black history stuff, I said, because you're going to need, we don't want to repeat these things.
Right.
And I respect what the Jewish faith has in terms of never forget about the Holocaust. And they want us to have like this kind of collective erasure so that we don't know what went on in the past. My son even had a roommate in college, and I was just appalled. He went to school in Ohio. And this is a white roommate that he had. He'd never heard of Nelson Mandela.
What?
No idea who Nelson Mandela was. I couldn't believe it.
I can't either.
So, and in our schools when we grew up, we were coming up in the time of the post civil rights period. We had a lot of Black history in our schools.
Yeah.
Schools were admittedly, pretty segregated, and our teachers would bring stuff in. And, my mother always took me to, every library program, you name it. And so I thought that I had a pretty rich, background, even though today I'm still learning stuff. I learn something all the time.
Right, right, right. Loretta, what do you say about who controls what our kids are being taught?
Well, both ladies have already mentioned the regular system and also the system outside the system. As I mentioned before, in the Black community, it is always our job continually to teach and educate not only ours, my dears, but others as well. And
Mhm,
sometimes we might even be put in a position to teach people older than we are.
mhm,
Whatever the case, y'all, we must continue to always teach and always reach. You never know if that white person that you have to teach. Now, again, let me just state this for the record. I honestly do believe that when we live in certain community dollars does go to those school systems as well. Yes, in certain areas where the schools are taught, those
mhm.
community dollars are specifically designed to go to that area. So then that's why the Republicans realized the thought that went off in their head and said, why don't we get on the school boards? Why don't we do this and that? Why don't we do this and that? And that was their pathway into politics. For
Mhm,
someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene, that was her pathway into politics. So yes,
mhm,
who teaches the kids?
mhm,
Everyone does. And
mhm,
who has the money to do it? Yes, it starts right at home with the school system, to be honest with you, with the school system that does it. Then there becomes money that's allocated. We all know about how they had those school systems back in the past in the 80s where they had money allocated for certain locations and stuff like that. They had money allocated for certain areas and stuff like that. Then Black people started moving into those communities, making life interesting for those locations and stuff like that. But the wonderful thing about our history as Blacks, our folks, our grandparents, still taught us stuff that we didn't know that definitely was not in the school books at school. They
right,
taught us and reminded us stuff so that we would not forget to pass it on. So that's really where the teaching begins, as they both have said, but it's
mhm.
also in the formal education route too. And I use that like that because it's interesting how they try to play this game with us. But don't you love it when we know people that live in the communities and mess them up? Whew,
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
ticks them off to another level of I can't say it.
Mhm. Let's see. Dr. Ronald Charles has here racism is based upon power, privilege, and prejudice. There are those who do not want to share the power and the privilege and power with others who they have come who they have come to enjoy.
I mean, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. It's all
Correct.
about power.
Yeah.
Correct.
And the crazy thing is, back in the 90s, when I was in college, I remember reading stuff about how the demographics of this country was changing. And by the year 2020, whites would be in the minority.
Right.
And as with any situation in life, you adapt or you perish. And right now, it's a moral panic
Mhm.
amongst those in power. It's a moral panic
It is.
because again, their demographics are declining. And
Right.
even though they come out and vote, I mean, as time goes on, they're not going to have the numbers.
Right. Right. That's right. That's right. So now it's time to get on to this college board situation because essentially to me the college board just bowed down to Governor Ron DeSantis and he literally scored a victory in them watering down their AP classes for class credit situation for African American studies. Um, the thing is that when you concede the way they did, they're saying that him as a politician knows more than they do as educators, as professional educators. I did a deep dive on, well, not too deep of a dive on DeSantis, but I didn't realize that he actually he studied history. That
Yeah,
was his degree.
yeah, from Yale. How's
Mm,
that for irony? Yeah, he has a degree in history from Yale.
yeah, but I also heard some students in the high school that he taught at say that it was like he was very much an apologist for the Confederate soldiers, pretty much for the Civil War. It was very interesting how he did his spin, excuse me, on history, and but you know, and the other thing that just really floors me is that the College Board essentially has really conceded giving an authoritarian an inch. I mean, because that's how he's behaving. And there is no way that he's going to stop at what he's just done. He's not going to stop.
What if everything works out like people predict,
Mhm.
basically Florida is a testing ground. Like
Oh,
assuming that he runs for president in 2024,
mhm,
and God forbid he wins,
mhm.
basically what's happening in Florida is going to go national. He's not going to stop at the borders of, at the, Georgia, Florida border, or the Florida, Alabama border. He's not going to stop there.
Right, right. That's right. That's right.
Well, I wanted to point out exactly what was taken out of
Okay.
the AP Black Studies course.
Okay.
And according to, I'm a professor, so I got to go and get an article. So I'm looking at what's taken out was Black queer studies,
Mm-hmm.
intersectionality, and activism.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of circled this word activism,
Mm-hmm.
the reparations movement.
Yes.
And I also circled reparations. And then this is where I might even be in trouble. Black scholars associated with critical race theory or CRT.
There you go.
And there's a professor named Kimberly Crenshaw,
Mm-hmm.
who is not only associated with critical race theory, she didn't develop it,
No.
she carried it further, but she's also introduced very successfully the idea of intersectionality.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought about her in this regard, and then this whole issue of activism.
Yes.
So that would include Black Lives Matter and just a whole host of other things. The protest against the police killings of George Floyd, for example, so forth and so on. And so this made me think, well, then what's left? And then I guess what would be included is what I call feel-good history, which feel-good history is things like, oh, let's look at all the inventions that have been provided by, Black inventors and scientists and things like that everybody can, kind of rally around.
Mm-hmm.
Because anything that had any elements of potential controversy, I think, is stripped out, at least based on what I understand in terms of what was taken out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. Samaj Brown says, who teaches our children? The music industry, if you want to call that music, TikTok, social media, etc.
Well, music can be a force for like any art form. It can be a teaching tool. It can be a force for change, but it has to be wielded properly. And it all depends on the arts.
Of music, I'm talking about, because some of the we had a whole show on that, a couple of shows about some of the music, like the gangster rap and stuff like that's glorifying violence and things like that. Come on. I mean,
a lot of music that's coming out today doesn't speak to me, but I'm knocking on 50. So yeah, but I grew up when gangster rap emerged, and again, you take the good with the bad. Like if you want to take it way back to the beginning with hip hop, when The Message came out more than 40 years ago, that was the reason that was such a groundbreaking song, is because, hey, these guys are describing my neighborhood. I know these, like the characters they talked about in their song. I know people like that. I've seen situations like what they describe. So this is, again, this is our history, for better or worse. And you got to take the good with the bad. Like you mentioned before about the inventions and the inventors. Yes, that's the good. but there was also bad. And it's not just slavery. One of the things that bothers me, and I see this from time to time, is when some commentators try to pit us against each other and turn it into the oppression Olympics. My take on it is simple. Whether it's the Holocaust, whether it's slavery, whether it's the Trail of Tears, whether it's the Japanese internment camps, all of those things happened.
Mhm.
All of those atrocities were committed by white people, and all of those things were wrong.
Mhm.
Period. Exclamation point. It's not negotiable. It's not up for debate. Those things happen. And if we're going to learn from those situations, then yes, we need to be, well, I shouldn't say we, because we're out of school, but the children coming up behind us need to be taught these things. We are doing them a serious disservice by whitewashing history.
Right. Right.
Amen.
Yeah. How do
I
you
wanna-
stop whitewashing history, Loretta?
I want to go back to the subject matter of AP courses and everything. And I'm thank you for Latrice for saying that. And thank you, Judy, because here's the point here. There, as you said, Judy, everyone's done their bad. And so are they going to include that in their AP courses? Are they going to mention that in their courses? Because that's a justification that you want to pull out the Black courses because you're saying that we have these certain subject matters. Well, then pull that out of their courses too, or cancel out their courses too. Cancel this culture if we want to, because this is ridiculous what they're talking about. They're just trying. Let me just stress this here because I have to say this. And I don't care who's listening. The white man needs somebody to try to put his foot on the neck of, okay? He can't do it to the Asians. This country owes too much money to China. He can't do it to the Russians because he believes they're his cousin. He can't do it to the Germans because he thinks some of them are their cousins too. He can't do it to the Israels. He can't do it to them. He can't even do it to the Middle East now because we're dependent on the oil. The white man needs someone to be angry at, you all. And that's what's going on. So we're the target. And why are we the target? Because that's what they believe. They've been taught this by ignorance. And so it is our job every day when we encounter these people, as well as some Black folks too, as we've learned in Memphis, when we encounter people who don't have the right ideas, we have to try to teach them. And when we can't teach them, shake the dust off your feet and keep on. But we have to keep trying to teach them. I hate to be the one saying teach them because I have a whole theory about all of this, but we've got to try to help. And so, and you're correct. This is just the beginning if they can get away with Florida. Everything is just a test ground with them. And they're always got a plan.
It is. It is. It's no doubt. You know, Pulitzer Prize winning author Alice Walker was erased from the program, the AP course. Harvard historian, Mr. PBS himself, Henry
Louis Gates,
was erased from the program. I mean, so I read something in an article that Joseph Stalin tried to rewrite Soviet history too by removing images of his rivals in the 1930s. All of it's like, what is a democracy? I mean, America is just going crazy backwards, and I don't. We have to be so vigilant in voting because that is the only last thing that we've got to turn anything.
Well, it's not the only thing. It's probably it's an important tool in our arsenal, but it's not the only one. I've always said on Twitter that the two easiest ways to make your voice heard are with your vote and your wallet.
Your dollars.
Wallet, yeah. That's for sure.
You know, money talks, BS walks. So, I mean, yes, by all means, be engaged and be informed so you can vote. I would never tell anyone not to vote. But also, you can vote with your dollars. Like, where you spend, look at the businesses you patronize. Look at who you give your money to. That speaks volumes as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You're very right, Latrice. And I can say that this weekend, I spent money at a Black-owned business because I remember thinking of taking one item off, and I said, "Oh, go ahead," because he had already given me a little discount anyway, and I just said, "It's my brother. It's a Black-owned business. We're exchanging dollars the appropriate way, right?" Freya Butler says, "Amen, Latrice. This is the beginning. I cry for my people. Too many are not listening."
I mean, just look at January 6th. It's almost like people have forgotten about that. And that was only 2 years ago.
How
I
can
mean,
we forget? If you look up any, I was working on a marketing campaign for a client, and I was looking up U.S. Capitol photos, and it floored me and triggered me at the same time to see all of these pictures come up that were from January 6th. It was awful. Oh, wow. Are you guys still there? Okay.
yeah, I'm still here.
Something weird happened on my
Yeah.
screen.
No,
Okay.
we're here. But to piggyback on what you were saying, Pam, in terms of what's been stripped out of the AP curriculum,
Mhm.
um, it goes back to what I was asking. Well, what's left? And this is a phenomenon that doesn't exist only in the United States.
Mhm.
And I really didn't have a sense of this until I went to France in 2019. And I ended up doing a research paper that the topic is racial capitalism, but it's looking at the tourism industry in France with respect to Black consumers.
Mhm.
And I found out that, we look for different kinds of experiences and things when we travel.
Mhm.
And there are these companies in France that focus on Black tourism.
Mhm.
And they do it at some risk because in France, for most of their history, this idea of race, as we look at it in the United States, has been a taboo topic.
Mhm.
And France has a history of colonization in the islands.
Mhm.
And so what you would find is in places like Guadeloupe and Martinique and some of these other islands
Mhm.
that they colonized, the history that's taught there is French history,
Mhm.
Correct.
and specifically white French history.
Correct.
So these people came and they were part of a study that, not a study that I did, but a study that I referenced, where they found that their history had been erased. And as a result, they didn't know certain things coming up. Certainly their children don't know. And they felt that they were suppressed on the basis of this lack of knowledge. So what we're saying now about what's happening in this country, what's happening in Florida, is a test case, because they want to have this, I don't know what you want to call it, racial amnesia
Mhm.
about things that have gone on in the past. And some of the things that have gone on, there are good things, bad things, ugly things associated with every culture.
Mhm.
But what they want to do is, and this is my theory, they want to engage in what I call this exercise of cultural superiority,
Mhm.
where their standards are embraced by the society as dominant, normal, and preferred. And all this other stuff is literally pushed down, buried, and just like that painting where the young man is whitewashing the paint for Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and all of that. That's what they would like to have, so that there would be this collective societal amnesia going forward.
Mhm.
And that kills off all these other discussions of the things they took out of the AP course. They took out activism, they took out reparations, scholars that are associated with CRT. And CRT has been used as this dumping ground to put anything that's related to race, to throw it in this bucket, critical race theory, when it's just factual stuff. And
Mhm.
critical race theory is just an idea. You can accept it or
Yeah.
not. That's all it is. It's just an idea.
No, we talked about this a long when I first started the show. I think Professor Jelani Coates. No, what's
Cobb, Jelani
Johnny
Cobb.
Cobbs, yeah.
New York? He had such good scholarship on that in the layman's English for everybody to be able to understand. And
Yeah.
he's now dean over there at Columbia Journalism School.
Yeah, I'm familiar with his work. I'm actually using his work to work on another project that I'm not I can't talk about it yet, but
Yeah.
I'm always working on something.
All right. All right. Really appreciate it for sure. For sure. Loretta, I forgot what we were saying exactly. Because
Let me
Dr.
speak on the critical race theory. Can
Yeah,
I speak on that?
yes,
Thank you.
yes, please.
So we all need to remind ourselves this all started when white people started saying that their children was affected from a psychological effect of learning about this history and everything about their parents. I sent something to Pam recently about how the grandparents of the
Oh,
1957
yeah.
trying to block a kid, a black girl from going to school. Now these same parents are now trying to hide from what they did. They're saying now with the critical race theory is that this is bothering our children. And why aren't you all, the rest of you people?
Mm-hmm.
Why aren't you concerned about how this affects our children? They could
Mm-hmm.
give less than anything else about other people's children, but that's what's going on. And so the problem is that we need to continually to speak and speak the truth to power. Yes, yes, I'm with you, Latrice. Money does talk a lot more than everything else. But we need to also educate again, because if we don't, some of our own people are still unaware of some of this stuff. And it's embarrassing that they are, because that means that we haven't done our job. And we haven't done it well enough that we have these people out there in our own community unaware and unknowledge. And to the point that I was having fun with this issue about saying, where are the Black Republicans? Where are they at? Why can't you speak on some of these things that's going on in Black Republicans? Where are you at? Why aren't you talking to your boy Ron DeSantis about all of this? What are you doing, Black Republicans? Because I understand this whole conservative theory, but what about this situation? So, so the CRT scenario that they're using, they're trying to use the feel good emotional situation to try to make us sound like, again, the bad person. And they've been doing this since race, you all. And so my problem is, I believe that we, again, I say us, the four of us right now, and the audience, what are we doing? I give us all an assignment. I say go next week or this week and go out there and find another Black person who's ignorant and try to connect with them and tell them what's up. And it's hard, y'all. It's very hard. You see a Black person, you try to educate them, but still, let's try, because how else, y'all? How else?
Well, the thing with that is that I have no problem reaching out to people, but and I say this at my job when I'm dealing with litigants. As much as I'm willing to help you, at some point you have to help yourself. Like, you have to want to learn. And I mentioned how I'm a Schomburg Society member, but Schomburg Center's in Harlem. I was born and raised in Brooklyn. So my exposure to the Schomburg didn't come until I was well into adulthood. And I would like to think that the people who live in Harlem take advantage of their offerings, because it's an amazing resource. It truly is. But for someone like me, that was very much out of reach. And, when I was in school, I would go on class trips to museums and whatnot. But it wasn't until I became older that I connected dots and realized that the real education is outside the classroom. That you can't just limit yourself to what goes on in that 45-minute class period. Again, you're doing yourself a disservice. Another thing was, especially when I got to high school and college, I got involved in extracurricular activities. So I expanded my horizons and broke out of the bubble, because it's very easy to stay in the bubble. I grew up in public housing, and I can say from my own experience that the majority of people who live in public housing are decent people. They just want to survive from one day to the next and do good things like everyone else. Yes, you have bad seeds, but you have those everywhere, even on the Upper East Side. So it's not, I have no problem reaching out to people, but at the same time, at some point, I can't do this for them. Like, I have no problem helping people. And I enjoy doing that, whether it's at my job or elsewhere. But it's not my job to coddle you. That, again, it's disingenuous on my part, and it's ultimately a disservice to the individual. Unless they're comatose, and they just woke out of a 5-year coma and are totally oblivious to what's happened within the last 5 years, There's no way they can't know what's going on and what's at stake. They just can't.
Mm-hmm. You know, one of the big issues about that's so important for our children in particular to learn about their past and history and the greats and all of that is that you can see yourself. It's so important for us to see ourselves doing well, seeing ourselves in certain positions so that we can realize that we too can achieve those heights. And so it's just so important, whether, because a lot of kids will say all they want to talk about is just slavery or whatever. Well, listen, before that history began, we were kings and queens and all this other stuff. So we need to know about world history. So what are they going to do about that? And I have a little clip I want to show you guys from an educator. Her name is Dr. Barbara Sizemore. Samaj Brown sent this to me earlier, and I thought it was so interesting. She was an American teacher and researcher in the field of education. She became the first Black woman to head a public school system in a major city when she was elected superintendent of DC public schools in 1973. And I want you guys to see this. I'm going to share this with you. Okay, hold on one second. Okay. Oh no, don't tell me. You found a problem playing this video. You have to download it. Let's see. Okay.
And there's just some things that are not comfortable for white people. They're not comfortable for them to talk about the possibility that Africans were here before the Europeans. So what do you do with the heads in Mexico that you find at San Lorenzo, at Tres Zapotes? What do you do with those? All right? You ignore them. What do you do with Columbus's diary that says the Africans know a way to the west, but it goes around the doldrums, we would never survive? What do you do with that? You ignore it. What do you do with Balboa's diary that says we came upon this African village in the isthmus? How did these Africans get here? What do you do with that? You ignore it. Why? To preserve the myth that the Europeans were here first. What do you do with all of this written literature and history that says that Abubakar II of Mali sent 200 ships to the west? One came back and said they were afraid that the others disappeared. And then to have Balboa find this village that looks just like Mali, where he was, what do you do with this information? You ignore it. You ignore it. Why? To preserve the myth of white superiority. That's what our whole educational process is devoted to. What do you do with this whole history? This is a written history, my dear. Written. I'm not talking about hearsay. I'm not talking about a griot said this. I'm not talking about something handed down from one generation to the other through voice. I'm talking about written history of the Egyptians. What do you do with this? You ignore it.
Okay. Let me get out of this. What did you guys think?
I think there's some truth to it. I think as we talked about before, like when it comes to our history, you have to tell the whole story, not just cherry pick and tell select parts. You know, I think too often, like when a comment was made about music and social media, you know, and I've said this before as well, how like canceling someone or something can be a useful tool to address grievances. But more often than not, at least from where I sit, it's often used to perpetuate pettiness. And that's what makes social media so toxic. Like social media can be a force for good. You know, it galvanized organizers and we were able to get our voices heard on certain issues. but you also have the bad, like stan culture when it comes, especially with music. Like stan culture to me is just toxic as hell. I want no part of it. And the crazy thing is, and I've said this as well, there's enough room, there's enough time for everyone to get a slice. Now, your slice may be bigger than mine or vice versa, but nobody's going to go hungry. And yet, you know, the cesspool is what makes money. It generates, you know, it was what goes viral, is what generates clicks. And of course, we don't own any of these social media platforms. That's a whole nother conversation. We don't own any of this. Like, we've made Black people, Black Twitter, so to speak, and whether or not I'm a part of Black Twitter is another conversation, but we made Twitter what it is, but we don't own it.
We've got a Black platform, though. There is one.
Yeah, Spoutable's up and coming, and I hope he succeeds. My only concern with that is that I don't want to see it become an echo chamber, because that's one of the reasons why America's in such dire straits now. We become echo chambers of, and listen, I get it. I don't want to, you know, I want to tune out the toxicity as well. But at the same time, we cannot stick our heads in the sand and act like that toxicity doesn't exist. It is there, and it's not going away.
Yeah. I can't now. Of course, right now I can't even find. Oh, here it is. No, that's not it either. I can't even find it on my phone right now. Fan base that's founded by Isaac Hayes the third or the second or whatever. Isaac Hayes, the legendary
Black
musician.
Moses.
But Black Moses. That's right, Latrice. His son owns that. Sure does.
Well, what I wanted to comment on your question, Pam, it kind of relates back to your comments earlier about, you know, our children needing to see, you know, certain kinds of things so that they can internalize those positive images. And one of the things that I do is, you know, I look at imagery from a marketing perspective in terms of just what's put out in society.
Right.
And I published a study that actually won an award. It shocked me. I was shocked that they published it, much less giving me some award for it, but whatever. Where I looked at books and articles going back to like the 1800s. And it was this global analysis where I was looking at the relationship between marketing and racism. And so I'm looking at things like advertising, you know, posters, signage, even things like exhibits. And one of the things that is probably the most disturbing is the fact that there were human zoos. And you don't have to take my word for it. You can Google it, because there's some documentaries about it and whatnot.
Human
that utilized
Pygmies,
Africans,
pygmies,
Native Americans in these zoo-like exhibits at things like world fairs and other kinds of venues where they were displayed for educational and entertainment purposes. And there's a book that's written by one of the considered like the godfather of Black advertising, a man named Tom Burrell.
Yes.
Who's now retired, but his company, the company bearing his name, is you know, does well in their sphere. He wrote a book called Brainwashed. And one of the things he talked about is how effective the decades and years of this imagery that featured, he focused on Black people, how they perpetuated this myth of Black inferiority.
Yes.
And when I talk about my theory of cultural superiority and what the society does to maintain that, it embraces this idea of this brainwashing that not only impacts us, it impacts the entire world. So
Mhm.
if you go and look at some of the marketing that's done in other countries, Asia, for example, you
Mhm.
see some of the most regressive and just terrible, stereotypical, tropey
Offensive.
depictions of us.
Yes.
And I'm not going back to the 1800s and 1920 and all that. I'm talking about like,
Clearly.
right now.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and it's just horrible. And he talks about that this brainwashing has been the most successful marketing effort of all time
Mhm.
in terms of what we believe about ourselves and what other people believe about us.
Mhm.
And when you relate this to this Tyree Nichols killing, we've even internalized these negative stereotypes.
Mhm.
It's not only marketing, it turns up in other media imagery. But
Yes.
I focus on marketing in large part because marketing is so ubiquitous and accessible. More
Yes.
people are going to see a negative commercial for some brand. It could be Pepsi or whatever.
Mhm.
More so than you're going to see some great work of art like, I don't know, the Mona Lisa or something,
Mhm.
you know. And
No.
it's in your face all the time. It's in your cabinet. It's
Yes.
on your clothes. It's everywhere.
It's social media. It's on TV.
Social media is everywhere.
Everywhere. Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Positively. But get jumping back to what Dr. Barbara Sizemore, you guys did see her video, didn't you? You saw it. I forgot to ask if you could see it.
We just heard their audio.
Oh,
Yeah, I
you
heard the audio, but I didn't see a visual.
Oh, you didn't. Oh, shoot. I'm sorry. I thought I could see it, but I thought I had you know what it was? I had to download that. And anyways, I digress. Well, at least you heard her. But from what she was saying, they were interviewed. She passed a long time ago. She passed back in like 2004. And what she was saying is about, look at all of these. We need to, our kids need to know more than just American history, Black history. They need to learn world history that encompasses everything. But here again, even with that, I don't know about you guys, but okay, my kids are grown now, but they had problems with getting proper school books even during that era, in the 90s and stuff, early
Well,
2000s.
yeah, I can remember that. I can speak to that experience because I distinctly remember in 11th grade, my 11th grade American history teacher, Mr. Rocks. He was
Mhm.
a nice guy, I guess, but what stuck out for me was the textbook we used. It was a green textbook, and to give you an idea of how old it
Mhm.
was very old because I'm convinced my parents used it. The book, no, I'm serious, because the book ends with JFK creating the Peace Corps. Now
What?
think about that. That means John F. Kennedy was still alive.
And
And
now,
he was assassinated in 1963. And
oh,
we were using that textbook when I was in high school. And
see,
this is going back like 30 years ago. But I distinctly remember that because I remember thinking, okay, the book ends with him creating the Peace Corps, but a lot has happened since.
right.
Again, I had to fill in the blanks on my own. And Mr. Waltz, he would incorporate current events in his lessons, but there was a whole lot missing from that textbook. I'll
Right.
never forget that.
Isn't that sad? And so what is
It's
and
crazy.
not to mention just that, we've talked about, I've heard parents complaining about wrong information in the textbooks. And,
It wouldn't surprise me.
It wouldn't surprise me either. But Pam, when we were in school, they didn't have these AP classes.
No, they did not.
I mean, we're older now. When my children went to school, and my children are young adults now, when they were in high school, they both took AP classes. And I distinctly remember my son took AP American history,
uh,
and I think he took AP World History. I'm not 100% sure, but I know he took that AP History class because there was an issue that I had to confront that had nothing to do with the content of the course. It had to do with something else.
mhm.
And the AP classes are selective. They're not open to every student.
Mm-hmm.
And it's at these like college prep schools, and I think you kind of have to do something, or you have to be allowed to take these classes.
Correct.
So the students that are taking the classes are the cream of the crop students at those schools.
Right.
And they do it for all kinds of things, calculus and some language classes, and English, so forth and so on. So what it's saying to me is that the vast majority of students, unless they're getting the supplemental education that I was speaking about from, if their families are taking them to certain places, museums and whatnot, like I mentioned, if they're not getting that, then I don't know where they're getting it from, unless they're motivated, for example, to look it up online. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of the things that I'm speaking about in terms of some of the research that I do, you can now find this content online. Mm-hmm. Because, institutions like the Smithsonian and whatnot are now putting much more of their content in digital format. So right. You can find it, if it's there.
Right.
So this is the thing that's kind of bizarre to me, is that, somebody like DeSantis in Florida is trying to suppress this information. Mm-hmm. But a lot of it is already out here. It's just
exactly.
Look away. And when young people, if you tell them not to look at something, mm-hmm. That's the first thing they want to find. Because remember when TV came out and started putting up those parental discretion advised shows? Yeah. That was the first thing we want to look at.
So let me interject something here. You just had that session, Pam, with AI, and how the lady mentioned that nowadays, even when they go to research stuff on AI, what is that DCT, whatever that thing is that
Chat GPT.
Yeah.
That now they're putting false information out there. Now universities are having problems with that. This is all collective. They're doing this all for a reason, you all. They're trying to mess up the learning tactics. They're trying to mess up if you're able to do that. We've got to find a way as Black people. And I have to say, we have to probably go back to beating the drums, y'all. Probably have to have people in the kitchen and everything, talking to folks, telling people what's really going on, because how else will they know?
Right.
We used to have a term we used to use in the Black community called pig Latin. We don't even do that anymore. But the point is that we have to, you all. We have to have a solution. And one of our best solutions, yes, is going to the library, going to the museum, teaching and talking to your fellow Black Americans and your white Americans. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we need them. Unfortunately, you all.
Well, yeah, because they're the ones who need to learn this stuff, not us. We already know it.
Right.
Like when the professor had mentioned about going to the Smithsonian, I went to the Smithsonian for the first time back in 2021, and I do intend to go again. I would compare it to a pilgrimage, like a Muslim having to travel to Mecca at least once in their lifetime. Mm-hmm. I think every person, Black, white, Latino, Asian, Indigenous, whomever, if they can, they should make at least one trip to that museum in the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture in their lifetime. It is an amazing place. The only complaint I had was when I went there, the hours were from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. So if you go, you will not see everything in one day. I cannot, and the professor knows exactly what I'm talking about. You will not see everything in one day. You probably won't see everything in 2 days, but you need to go.
Right. I think it takes at least 2 days to go through there. And like I said, I've been there multiple times, so I've had the opportunity to see different parts or to start at a different place. Mm-hmm. Because the first time I just felt like I was overwhelmed.
It was overwhelming.
But that's another thing too, to combat what Loretta is saying is, there's misinformation out on the internet, and there's always been misinformation out about our history. Sometimes perpetuated by some of the most prominent and so-called learned people, in the society. But
Well,
if you go and you do what I call evidence-based research, where you start with the artifact and then you trace the history behind the artifact, I mean, the thing, it is what it is.
yes.
So that helps to get around some of the misinformation and the untruths that have been perpetuated.
And here's the thing, I know those euphemisms have become popular and part of normal lexicon, but I personally don't care for them. It's not disinformation, it's not misinformation, it's not untruths, it's propaganda and lies. Let's just call it what it is. It's propaganda and lies. And unfortunately, those modern day euphemisms have become part of lexicon, but they irk me to no end. It's just like when I hear the word minority. I'm like, minority by definition means lesser than, and I'm no less than anybody else. So like, don't use that word to describe me, even though I hear it all the time, but it is what it is, but that's just my pet peeve. So
the white people are the minority now. Come when you start.
Don't tell them that.
When you start looking at
You can't tell them
that. When you look at
Roland Martin has a whole book out about that, about them becoming the minority, and the word is that they. I hate to generalize people, but many of them on the other side, the unevolved ones, think that what was done to us, we will do to them. Nobody, we just want to live.
Yeah, exactly. I said that. We just want to be.
No,
right.
Who wants to enslave and beat up and torture other people?
Who has time for that?
Who has time for that? We just want to live. That's all. Just live in peace.
Reverend Al Sharpton said that last week at Tyree Nichols' homegoing. He said, we're not asking for special treatment. We just want equality. We just want to exist. That's all, equality. But we're talking to people who are operating out of fear, you all. Remember, they're operating out of fear. And we have to sometimes have to help and teach them. Don't operate out of fear. We're not here to hurt you. We've forgiven you. We've forgiven you. It's our duty to forgive you.
That's right.
But now just get on with life and let's just try to coexist here.
Right.
But they have to do the work.
Agreed, my dear. I'm not going to argue with you on making people work.
All of those on the right wing nut jobs need to get some counseling. That's all. Dr. Deborah Jenkins says, Pamela, I came in late, but I'm really enjoying this. My ears stood up to hear Dr. Davis speak about evidence-based research. I totally believe in proving my point through research. Thank you, Dr. Jenkins. She's actually going to be on the show on the 19th, and she's going to be talking about reparations. This will be my second time having someone talk about reparations, and it'll be interesting hearing it from her perspective, because not only is she a scholar, she's also an ordained minister too. So I think we're going to be in for a treat on Sunday, February 19th. Next Sunday, isn't next Sunday the Super Bowl? The 12th?
Yes, it is.
I'm not going to have a show because I don't know.
You can't compete with that.
I can't compete with it. Forget it. It won't work, right? Let me put Ron Charles's piece up here. Oh, no, that's me. Let me see. Ron, here it is. Dr. Charles, DeSantis is dangerous because he is educated and deliberate in what he's doing. Yes, he is. He knows what he is doing is wrong, but he is trying to garner support of those who do not want to face the reality of what their ancestors did to enslave people, intern people, and Native Americans. Yes, I would agree. Yeah. Oh, Deborah has another comment. Okay, we actually want equity, but that's their greatest fear. Their greatest fear is that if we ever received equity, we'd zip right past them because we are creators, inventors of most innovators. Yeah, we are creators. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I tell you, ladies, we try to solve all the world's problems in our show. Every week, every Sunday. I'm thinking, we're gonna try to solve something. I do feel a little bit better because my anxiety, I tell you, it's just too much going on. It's just overwhelming, absolutely overwhelming, what's going on. And I think that I don't I'm very much a believer. I have to listen to my music and have to read the word and got to know you have to know God for yourself because we are living in a very peculiar time. Very peculiar. Very
What's
peculiar.
that? What's the saying? We're living in a time where we can do nothing but trust God.
That's it. That's it. That's all. I mean, seriously, you
Yeah.
need to be leaning all the way in on your faith and all of that because it's just bizarre. It's just when and to see those men and women, and I say that loosely, in Congress wearing AR-47 pins instead of the American flag. I don't understand that. I can't comprehend that.
I don't understand. I've seen Ron DeSantis campaigning and using that logo freedom
Mm-hmm.
as the slogan, and I'm just saying, well, whose freedom is he lobbying for?
I don't know. He's got a book
It's
coming.
not ours, I can tell you that much.
Judy,
And I
It's
noticed
just
it because
so bizarre.
my oldest brother lives
It's
in
so
Florida, and I
bizarre.
clown him about this all the time. He's not lobbying for black freedom, that's for sure.
right. How does your brother like living in Florida? I look at all black people in Florida like y'all still want to live there? I
Well,
mean,
he moved down there for college 30 something years ago, and he liked it down there. Obviously, when he got there back in the 90s, it wasn't what it is now. But that to me is even more interesting that Florida has taken such a hard turn to the right
mm-hmm,
because it wasn't always what it is now.
mm-hmm.
And I half jokingly say to him, "It's like, yo, like you got crazy ass governor, you got crazy ass senators, like, and your neighbors don't help either, because unfortunately for him, he does live. I don't want to say he lives in Trump territory, but it's not uncommon to see MAGA supporters.
Oh,
He lives in Delray Beach, which is like Central Florida. So I don't know, for those who are familiar with how Florida is laid out,
mhm.
like, and I even said here in New York is not as liberal as some people like to think it is. Like, there are MAGA people here if you know where to look.
Yeah, upstate, Long Island areas. Yeah, yeah.
Just
Interesting.
like in Michigan, like I remember Michael Moore had talked about this, like the Upper Peninsula. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, Detroit may be liberal and democratic, but once you leave Detroit,
you leave
woo,
Detroit, it gets real
You
interesting
don't
stuff.
have to go to the upper floor.
Peninsula. You don't have to go that far.
Right.
Years ago, I was kicked out of a restaurant I was doing business with. We were talking on the phone. Everything was cool. My white colleague who was leaving that job at the radio station left me this account. I'll never forget it. And I came there with my little suit on and my briefcase. I was clean as a board of hell. And I said, "Hey, Mr. So and so, I'm Pam from Wham." And you could have heard a rat piss on cotton, as they say. And he escorted me right out. And that was in Milan, Michigan, at the Danube Inn. I will never forget it. And I got scared because of that reaction. It was out in the country, and I had to get back to the station, back to Ann Arbor. And so there was a decent amount of driving alone on this rocky road. No, yeah. And that wasn't far. That was just outside of Ann Arbor, Michigan. So, yeah.
We
UP.
we are Black history every day, every
Yes, we are.
second. We're
We are.
Black history. When I traveled a lot for my job for the federal government, I went into countries where there was just me there.
Yeah.
Just me there. And I would have people walk up to me and want to touch my face.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I'm
And I
getting
would
here.
yeah. And
Or
I
they
would
want
tell
to touch
them,
your hair.
yes, yes, we're Black history every day. What we say and do every day is another chance to reach somebody, some ignorant individual, every day, you all, every day. I say this to not you ladies, but also to the audience. every day what our actions are, how we react to things. We're Black history. When we go into a store, now sometimes, yes, I'll go into a store and I will definitely use my alpha female because something needs to be said and something needs to be corrected. And then after I'm finished with that, I'll summer it down and let people know not everybody Black is ignorant. We can get things accomplished. We can talk through this whole scenario and even deflate the situation. And where is your manager at anyway? You're beneath my conversation. I need someone who can handle my conversation. We're Black history every day. We can teach people every day. We will and we shall always get our respect. It is 1 inch at a time.
That's right. Well, listen, guys, I found out that when I thought I lost you all, what it was that my Facebook feed went out. And so those that are on Facebook, I don't know what happened. The live feed shut off. Hopefully, the recording will still be on Facebook. But it's time to say goodnight. I enjoyed you ladies so much. I will see you all on February 19th with Dr. Deborah D. Jenkins. Reverend Dr. Deborah D. Jenkins. We're going to be talking about reparations. What else you going to talk about, Dr. Deborah? We'll find out on February 19th. You guys have a wonderful Super Bowl weekend. Have a blessed week. You all take care. Let's wave everybody out, guys.
Peace and blessings, everyone. Take care. Have a good night.